Say that you're a great audience, but I have to admit, these are great comedians that have been up here tonight. I'm so impressed with their original material. I really am. It's very impressive what they've done and how they've grown in 1 year as well. Now we're going to tally up the points, but while we're telling those points, we're going to entertain you. I mean, you are so lucky. You've heard of Laurel and Hardy, you've heard of Abbott and Costello, you've heard of Martin and Lewis. Wait, don't walk out. I haven't even finished right yet. The old prostate's acting up. Go ahead, I'm dead. I've been there, I know. Ladies and gentlemen, what greater comedy team to bring you tonight here at the Laugh Factory. They were here last year. We're proud to bring back the comedy team of Father Dan Brandt and Rabbi Moshe Wolf.
Pat, you just screwed your disability. He's on disability. He's up here going like this. My name is Rabbi Moshe Wolf. This is Father Dan Brandt, and we represent tonight the Chaplain's office, the Chaplain's unit, and are honored to close the evening again as we had the great time, the great opportunity to do so last year. Tom Dreesen, you're a gem. Thank you for once again taking on this job and supporting this great cause. Tom said to me out in the bar area before the show, he says, Dan, I will do this show until the day I die. So, Joe Ahern, you might want to repeat it a little sooner than every year. Thank you to Jamie Masada as well. Thank you, Jamie, for, I know there's a line of 150 people outside, and Jamie made sure that none of them are Catholic. They're all the Protestants. They have to wait outside. Appreciate you doing that, Jamie, and thanks for giving us such great wait staff. I hope you're all tipping your waitresses. My waitress right back here was Mary. I used this one last year. I'm going to use it again because it's great. If you need a drink still, even though it's after last call, just hail Mary. Joe Ahern, God bless you for your good work with the 100 Club. You put on a great show tonight, but what you do the other 364 days a year is just truly a miracle. You help a lot of families through a lot of hard times. Thank you. Joe Ahern called me this morning and says, Dan, we've got more than a sellout crowd tonight. We've got way over a sellout crowd. It's if I wasn't nervous enough. I was more nervous than a 10-year-old at a Jerry Sandusky sleepover. Now you're really putting the pressure on me, Joe, but God love you, pal. Moshe and I come up here tonight totally unworthy compared to the other talent that was here. You know that they are vying for prizes. We are not. They also had a 3 to 5 minute time limit. We do not. We want to make sure this counts for your Sunday obligation, so we're going to keep you here for probably a half hour. We are not worthy. You know, a few years ago, the superintendent of police sent his assistant out to find him a pair of loafers. The assistant came back with Moshe and me. So we are going to let the other talent, the other 8 competitors this evening, vie for the great prize. It is a prize of $1,000 worth of vouchers to the Laugh Factory. And Moshe says, do we really want to be in the competition and win $1,000? For that dump? I said, okay. So, thanks again, Jamie. There was a little bit of a hoopla earlier in the evening. I don't know if you guys caught this before the show started. Toward the back of the theater, there was a gentleman laying across 3 chairs. And Jamie Masada, the owner of the place, said, sir, you can't take up 3 seats. And the guy kind of dismissed him. He goes, ah! And he just ignored him. And so Jamie went over and got Tom Dreesen. And Tom Dreesen went over and said, hey, buddy, you can't take up 3 seats. We're going to sell out tonight. We need these seats. And the guy dismissed him, too, with a grunt. He goes, ah! And he ignores Tom as well. So Tom gets Solomon, and Solomon's a no BS kind of guy. He walks over to him, and he says, hey! And he picks him up by the collar, up over his head, off the ground. He says, where are you from? The guy goes, ah! The balcony! Moshe and I are not going to tell tonight any Hispanic jokes, and we're not going to tell any black jokes. You know why? Because when you've heard Juan, you've heard Jamal. I'll tell you this, I apologize. I'm using notes, as you can see. I don't have it all up here like the other acts tonight. I wish I had, as I admitted to last year, one of those teleprompters like President Obama uses when he gives a speech. And that way we'd have this in common too. Everything coming out of my mouth will be an absolute joke as well. You heard what one prison inmate said to the other, right? That is, you know, the food here was better when you were governor. I just want to see, by measure of applause, how many Southsiders do we have here this evening? And how many Northsiders do we have here this evening? You know how you can tell the difference between a Southsider and a Northsider, right? When a Northsider takes his bicycle to the store to go shopping, he wins the esteem of his friends. His friends will see him driving down the street, riding his bicycle down the street, and they'll say, "Oh, look at Trevor running his errands on his bicycle. He's..." That's not even the friggin' joke. Oh. He's saving the earth, he's being very earth conscious, he's reducing the carbon footprint, he's improving his health. Isn't that admirable? But on the south side, you know what they say when someone rides their bike to the grocery store? "Oh, looks like Paulie got another DUI. Last year when we were here, Moshe asked me midway through the show, because he wanted to tell a joke that would turn a few faces red. He says, "Father Dan, you know, during Lent, you can turn a meat dish into a fish dish by offering dispensation over it." And he said, "Can you offer me dispensation tonight to tell a less than politically correct joke?" Well, this was toward the end of the show. I don't know why he waited till the end of the show to ask that, but tonight, I'd like to offer him dispensation now, so he can go crazy right off the bat. Moshe, have at it.
I'm honored and privileged to be here this evening. First of all, Jamie Masada, thank you for the place. Sinatra Rob. I heard a great line about Jamie. 2 weeks ago, he came home and it was real late. Walks into the house, gets undressed, goes to the medicine cabinet, takes out 2 Tylenol and a cup of water, goes to bed. And his wife said, "What's this for?" He says, "It's for you." She says, "I don't have a headache." He says, "Good, that's the answer I wanted." That's a true story. Now, talking about true stories, let me tell you a story about Joe Ahern that's going to move your heart. Joe, where are you? Let's give him a round of applause for everything he's done for the 100th time. I'm going to tell you a fact that none of us really knew, and I just found this out last week. I went to Father Brandt's sermon, and he told me, he says, "Did you know that Joe Ahern used to work for Southwest Airlines?" I said, "No kidding, really?" He said, "Yeah, he used to be some kind of CEO over there, but regularly he would fly flights with Southwest just to see what's going on the planes." So on one flight that's taking off from Chicago to LA, listen to the story. Now we all know Southwest is very family friendly. So the little kid, Betsy, she's sitting next to Mom, and she says, "Mom, can I ask you a question? If big teddy bears have little teddy bears, and big people have little people, why don't big airplanes have little airplanes?" Mom starts squirming in her chair. She doesn't know what to answer. So she says, "Come on, Mom, what's the answer?" She says, "You know, I have an idea. When you see that flight attendant walking down the aisle, you stop him and you ask him that question, and he'll have an answer for you." Who comes walking down the aisle? Joe Ahern. Walking down the aisle, the little says, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" He says, "Yes, sweetheart, what would you like to know?" She says, "I want to ask you a question. If big teddy bears have little teddy bears, and big people have little people, why don't big airplanes have little airplanes?" And Joe looks down at her and says, "Sweetheart, who told you to ask me that question?" And she says, "My mommy." Joe says, listen, you tell your mommy that at Southwest, the reason big airplanes don't have little airplanes is because we pull out on time. Let her explain it to you.
I revoke that dispensation.
I was so touched by Father Dan's dispensation. Let me tell you what happened in this church a couple of weeks ago. Father Dan was invited to, what's it called, Holy Name Cathedral or St. Cathedral? I'm Jewish, how should I know? I don't know.
Stay out.
So he gives this beautiful, beautiful sermon at Holy Name. At the end of the sermon, a cop walks over to him and says, son of a bitch, that was the best goddamn sermon I've heard ever.
It's a true story.
And Father Dan says, sir, this is the house of God. Your language, please. I can't believe you just said that. He says, goddamn, that was the best goddamn sermon I heard. And Father Dan says, please, the language. He says, not only that, I just wrote a $5,000 check to the church. And Father Dan says, no shit. So last week, it's 9 o'clock at night, I'm trying to take a nap, the phone rings. He says, who is it? Father Dan. He says, let me tell you what happened in Millennium Park. I said, well, what happened? He says, did you hear the story about the two old women sitting on the bench? I said, no, what happened? He says, these two old women are sitting on the park bench, and along comes this bodybuilder. Beautiful body, stark nude. And he starts running through the park. One woman had a stroke, and the other one missed. I know you guys know Ron White from Search Our Business up on Western Avenue, big supporter of the police. He told me a joke here this evening. I would, now, by this stage of the game, you know me. I would never say such a joke in public if I didn't get dispensation, and it was a true story. So this is what happened. He told me this happened at Father Dan's school. Father Dan used to have a school, at the day school, then they have a PTA meeting. Now this is a story, boy, it kind of moves my heart. The three women are sitting around after PTA, and then each one are commiserating the heavy heart. And the first woman says, you're not going to believe this. My daughter's 16 years old. Last night, she's in the shower, and she left her purse on the table. I go through her purse, I find a pack of cigarettes. She's 16 years old, I can't believe she's smoking. And the second mom says, you know, last night, my daughter was in the shower, and also she left her purse on the table. I opened the purse, there's a bottle of vodka. She's 16 years old, I can't believe she's drinking. And the third mom says, she says, you know what happened to me? Last night, my daughter was in the shower. I open up her purse. I find a box of condoms. She's 16 years old. I never knew she had a penis. If you don't believe the story, you can ask Ron. I would never make up such a story. Go ahead, Father Dan.
You heard about the two older guys who go back to college. They're going to finish up their college degrees. And they go together into the counselor's office. The first guy goes in and meets with the counselor, and the counselor looks at the guy's previous transcript. He says, you know what you need is a logic class. And the guy says, logic? What's logic? He says, the counselor says to him, well, it's how the human mind works. It's the thought process. I'll give you an example. He says, do you own a lawnmower? The guy says, sure, I own a lawnmower. He says, well, then I presume you have a lawn, which makes me presume you have a house. And he says, yeah, of course. He goes, well, if you own a house, I'm guessing you might have a family, a wife, kids. He goes, of course. He says, then I presume you're heterosexual, right? And the guy goes, well, yeah, naturally. And the counselor says, well, I gathered all that just by asking you one question. That's logic. He says, wow, that's really interesting. I'll take the class. He leaves the counselor's office after enrolling, sees his buddy out in the hall who's going to go in for his appointment. And his buddy says, what'd you sign up for? And the first guy says, I signed up for a logic class. friend says, what's logic? He goes, well, you own a lawnmower? He says, no, I live in an apartment. Ha! What are you, homosexual? We're here tonight for your entertainment, and so I'd like to ask you, what kind of jokes would you like to hear tonight?
You know any religious jokes?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you asked. I got a ton of them. You heard about the guy who goes, excuse me, the guy's name is Jesus, you may have heard of him. Jesus walks into a bar, and there's a fella sitting at the bar with a cast on his arm. He looks like he's been through hell. He looks like the wife of an NFL player. And he's... Jesus walks up and touches the guy's arm, and all of a sudden the cast falls right off, and he can move his arm. He says, wow, thank you, Jesus. Next guy sitting at the bar has got an eye patch on. And Jesus walks over and he touches the fella's eye, and off comes the patch, and the guy's like, oh my God, I can see, this is wonderful. The third guy's sitting there, he's got a CPD t-shirt on, got crutches under his arms, and Jesus walks over, he's about to touch him, and the guy says, get away from me, Jesus, I'm on disability. The Jewish woman who walked into heaven, and St. Peter's showing her around. This Jewish woman is taking in all the sights, and as they walk down the hall, St. Peter says, now here's our gymnasium, and here's our library, and here's our computer room, and here's our swimming pool. Finally, he says, do me a favor now, ma'am. As we go past this next area, I need you to kind of tiptoe. And they tiptoe right past the next area quietly, and they sneak past, and she says, what was that for? And he says, well, that's where all the Catholics hang out, and they think they're the only people up here. You know how firemen all have side jobs, right? There's this fireman who's got a side job building decks. And he builds these beautiful decks and patios and porches and so forth. But he always overbills. He'll buy more wood, more lumber than he needs to. And it came to his attention from his wife, who kind of beat him up over this practice because he was basically stealing. She goes, you need to go to confession. So he does. And he meets with the priest and he says, you know, I've been doing this. And he explains what he's been doing. And the priest says, well, you know, you can't very well refund money. People will know what you've been up to. So I'll tell you what I want you to do is make a novena. This is your penance. Make a novena. And the guy looks at him kind of dumbfounded. Imagine that, a firefighter looking dumbfounded. And he says, I don't know how to make a novena, Father, but if you've got the plans, I've got the lumber. You heard about Joe Ahern looking for a parking spot. He was picking up a $10,000 donation downtown, and he had to be there right at 10 a.m. And he was running late, and he was really nervous because he couldn't find a parking spot. He's driving around, hunting desperately for a spot, and he decides, you know, I'm going to say a prayer over this. Joe's a very holy man. You might know this. And he prays to God. He says, God, if you just please, I need this $10,000 donation for the 100 Club. I've got to get upstairs. If you could open up a parking spot somewhere in front of this building, I will give up drinking, I will give up smoking, I will give up gambling. And right then, a spot opens up in front of the door. And Joe says, never mind, I found one, we're good. One last religious joke, since you asked, and that is about the nun who joins this cloistered convent, and she takes a vow of silence. And the rule is you can't speak, but once every 5 years, you can speak 2 words to your superior. And so after 5 years in this convent where she's miserable, she gets her 2 words with the superior, and she says, bed lumpy. And it goes about her way. 5 years later, she gets 2 more words with her superior, and she says, food stinks. Fast forward 5 more years, she gets her 2 words. Can you guess what those 2 words were? I quit, exactly. And the superior looks at her and says, sister, I'm not at all surprised. You've been with us for 15 years and done nothing but bitch, bitch, bitch. Oh, take it away, pal.
So here's a true story that's going to kind of move your heart. Commander Tom Argenbright, where are you? Let's give him a round of applause. That's a great job down at the airport. I come out the airport the other day, and I meet Tom. He looks a little beat up. Looks a little walking a little bit with a limp, and he has a little mark on his face, and I said, Tom, what happened? He says, no. I said, Tom, what happened? He says, let me tell you a story. He says, last week, I decided to go with my wife down to Springfield to the state fair. So we go to the state fair, and what's the first booth we bump into is the breeding bulls. So we pass the first booth, and there's a big sign in front. This bull mated 50 times last year. Tom's wife gives him a little nudge and says, Tom, you know what that means? Once a week. Doesn't say anything. They move to the next booth. There's this beautiful bull, and then there's a sign on the front that says, this bull mated 120 times last year. She goes, you see? You can learn something from that. That's twice a week. You know what I'm talking about. Then they move to the third booth, and there's this beautiful bull. And there's a sign on the front that says, this bull mated 365 times last year. And his wife goes, Tom, see, that's what I'm talking about, getting a little bit every day. And Tom looks over to his wife and says, honey, can you do me a favor? Can you go ask the bull, when he made it 365 times last year, was it with the same cow? I think we're running out of time. I got two more real good ones. This is a true story. This happened in Area 3. These two teams attack guys, 4 coppers. They'd go golfing every Sunday. This is like a ritual. Every time from May to September, anytime they go out, they go golfing. Happened was, one guy gets transferred out. So 3 of them, they need a 4th guy. So they're saying, hey, who can we get to be our foursome? So one guy says, you know, I know Chief Rotten is an avid golfer. He says, why don't we ask him to join us? The guy says, yeah, he's a nice guy. He says, why not? He's great. Let's ask him to join us. So they go knock on his door and say, Chief, we're looking for a 4th guy to play golf. He says, can you join us? He says, sure, no problem. He says, what time? He says, Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. He says, 9 o'clock. He says, listen, I might be 10 minutes late, but I'll be there. Sure enough, Sunday comes around. He's there waiting for them at the golf course, and they see that he's golfing with his right hand. Beat them all cold at the game. No problem. They finish playing, and 3 of them think together, say, you know, these guys are pretty good golfer. Let's ask him back for next week. They say, Chief, can you come play with us next week? He says, sure. What time? He says, 9 o'clock. He says, well, I might be 10 minutes late. No problem. Next Sunday comes around, and this time they see he's golfing with his left hand. Bam, beat them all cold to the game. 3rd week come, they say, you know what? Let's invite him again for next week. Comes next week, he says, what time are we golfing? He says, 9 o'clock. Chief says, 9 o'clock? He says, I might be 10 minutes late. Wait for me, I'll be there. And this time he's again with the right hand. So they play the game, and at the 15th hole, one of the cops pull him on the side and say, listen, Chief, I don't know where you're coming from. One week I see you playing with the right hand. One week I see you playing with the left hand. Every week you ask us the same question, what time is it, 9 o'clock? And every week you get the same answer, I might be 10 minutes late. What's the deal? Listen to this wisdom. Chief Rotten answers as follows. He says, I'm very superstitious. So what I do is I wake up in the morning, I look at my wife. If she's laying on the right side, I play with my right hand. If she's laying on the left side, I play with my left hand. So the cop says, what happens if she's laying on her back? He says, I'll be 10 minutes late. It's a true story. You can go ask him after the show. I got one more, and then I'm done. Because I get all fathers recouping from, what do you have, a vasectomy or something? I don't know,
yeah, that's what Tom Dreesen told everybody on 890 AM this past week. Thank you again. The Cardinal called me on Saturday.
I thought you said circumcision. Then he said vasectomy. I got also trouble. But listen, this is a true story. I heard it from Tom Dreesen over here. Where's Dean Angelo? Let's give a round of applause for the head of the FOP. What a man. He told me the story happened with a buddy of his. This would happen. The girl goes downstate to Champaign for college. Mom's gonna go visit them for Christmas. Mom goes to the house, and there's Johnny setting the table for the holiday. Mom looks at Johnny and says, "It's so nice of you to set up." Then he looks in the room, she sees there's Betsy. Betsy is very low-cut dressed, very, how do you say?
I wouldn't.
Very well endowed, is that the proper word?
Some might say.
And Johnny says, "Mom, it's all platonic. She's down the hall, she's here to help me set up for dinner, so please, don't think anything else." Mom, don't say a word, but he watches the interaction between Johnny and the girl throughout the meal. They're winking at each other, they're looking at each other. Mom, don't say a word. They finish the meal, Mom says goodbye, Mom says, "Johnny, Mom, trust me, it's all platonic. She's just here to help me." No problem. A day goes by, and Betsy tells Johnny, says, "Listen, I'm not saying she did do it. I'm not saying she didn't do it. But since your mom was here for the holiday dinner, I can't find my silver ladle that we use for the meatballs." So Johnny says, "What should I do?" So Betsy says, "Why don't you write Mom a letter?" So he writes like this. "Dear Mom, thank you so much for coming for the holiday dinner. I'm not saying you did do it. I'm not saying you didn't do it. But since you were here, I can't find my silver ladle that we use for the meatballs." Mom writes back like this. "Dear Johnny, I'm not saying that you're sleeping with Betsy. I'm not saying that you're not sleeping with Betsy. But if you'd be sleeping in your own bed, you'd find it under your pillow."
All right, do we have maybe preferably up in this area, any officers who happen to be carrying tonight? Can I ask a favor? That red light is on. Would you just shoot it out, please? Because I don't want to end. We're having too much fun. I will close with this last. Again, I want to ask your input because we're here to entertain you tonight. What would you like to hear? Oh, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Thank you for asking. You heard about the guy who goes into the psychologist's office and he says, well, first of all, the guy's wearing nothing but cellophane. He's wrapped completely in cellophane, nothing else on. The doctor looks him over and says, "Clearly I can see your nuts." Same guy goes into the psychologist. He's got to take that Rorschach test, the ink blot test. And in the first picture, he says, all these ink blots, he says, "I see a naked lady." And the doctor drops the card, looks at the next one, he says, "Now I see two naked ladies." And the next picture, and now I see three naked ladies. And the doctor says, "All right, I think you've got some deep-seated psychosexual issues." And the patient says, "Me? You're the guy with all the dirty pictures." All right, this old fella's in the hospital, laying in his hospital bed. He's got the oxygen mask on, and the nurse comes in the room, and he says, "Nurse, can you tell me, are my testicles black?" She says, "Excuse me?" He says, "I said, are my testicles black?" "How should I know?" He says, "Can you check?" And so she lowers his blanket, lifts up his gown, lowers his shorts, and she's poking around down there, looking around, and she says, "No, I don't. They look perfectly normal." And he's disgusted. He rips the mask off his face. He says, "I said, are my test results back?" Same old guy laid in the hospital bed. His grandson comes in to visit, 6, 7 years old, whatever. The grandson says, "Grandpa, can you make the frog sound?" Grandpa says, "What?" He says, "Can you make the sound that a frog makes?" And Grandpa says, "Why?" The kid says, "Because Grandma says that we're going to Disney as soon as you croak." Finally, the same old guy gets a diagnosis he did not want to hear. The doctor says, "I've got some bad news. I've got some worse news. One, you've got cancer. And second, you have Alzheimer's." And the guy says, "Well, thank God, at least I don't have cancer." did hear a funny story about Ronald Reagan when he was suffering that awful disease. No, nothing like a great Alzheimer's joke to bring up a crowd. When Ronald Reagan had that awful disease, and I guess his big pickup line at the bar was, "Do I come here often?" All right. I think I'm going to call it on that. You got other material? You had one. Anybody got to pay a babysitter or get out of here? You got hot dates? All right, we are going to take off. We do borrowing from Eric Holder. You know Eric Holder, the soon-to-be former U.S. Attorney General. I think I'd like to repeat the most gorgeous, the most beautiful 3 words he's ever spoken. I'm out of here. Before we go, stay right here, Tom. We do have a website. The chaplain's office has a website. If you just Google us, just Google Chicago Police Chaplain. It'll bring you right to our site. And on there is all kinds of very helpful information, not only for you officers, but also for your families. So family members who are here tonight, there's a bar on there, a menu item on there, helpful information for police families. You are part of our family, or part of the bigger police family. Please use it. And there's also a link on there where you can email us, and I wish you would please email Moshe, and if you have any good jokes, so he finally might have something to share with us next year. All right? How about just a moment of silence, or maybe not silence, but just a moment to recognize the 571 officers' names who are inscribed on that memorial down at the lakefront, right across from Soldier Field. We are here tonight honoring them and the good work that the 100 Club does to serve and to help their families, to support their families. And so God's grace and God's mercy be upon them, and God's peace and comfort be upon all of us here together tonight. God grant safe travels to all of us going home, and as my favorite Irish blessing goes, as you slide down the banister of life, may the splinters be pointed downward. Good night.
Thank you, thank you.
45 years in show business, I've never followed such a filthy comedy team in my whole life. I'm a former altar boy. I don't know about you, but I never thought I'd ever see a priest or a rabbi tell those kind of jokes. I'm glad they did, but I never thought I'd see that, you know. That's innate.